I never thought moving out of a neighborhood would land me in court, but that's exactly what happened. The second I told the HOA I was leaving, this one woman, let's call her Karen, completely lost it. She wasn't just any member of the HOA. She was the HOA president, rule enforcer, and self-proclaimed neighborhood sheriff. The moment she realized I was leaving her precious community, she slapped me with a lawsuit. For leaving. Yeah, you've heard that, right? She sued me for moving out. At first, I thought it was a joke. How can someone sue you for selling your house and getting out? But Karen had a plan. She claimed I owed dues, broke made-up rules, and even said I needed permission to remove my own mailbox. It got personal fast. I was furious but also determined. So, I started digging. Not just into her, but into the entire HOA. What I found was way worse than I imagined. Turns out, Karen's HOA wasn't just aggressive, it was operating under rules that were never even legally approved. I hired a lawyer, took a closer look at their bylaws, and 5 minutes after stepping out of that courtroom, I realized something. Karen had just handed me the golden ticket to take the whole thing down. But here's the best part. What I did next not only got her lawsuit thrown out, it made her entire HOA illegal. And let's just say, Karen didn't take that well. So how did I turn a bogus lawsuit into the downfall of the most feared HOA in the neighborhood? And what happened when Karen realized she was no longer in charge? You're not going to believe how this all played out. Let me take you back to where it all started. It all started about 2 years ago when I moved into what looked like a quiet, well-kept neighborhood. The kind of place where lawns were always trimmed, mailboxes matched, and people waved at each other, at least on the surface. But behind those perfect hedges was an HOA that ran like a private dictatorship, with Karen right at the center. She ran every meeting, handed out fines like candy, and had a say in everything from what color you could paint your door to how many plants you were allowed in your front yard. At first, I tried to play nice. I paid the dues, went to a few meetings, even followed the rules, most of them. Anyway. But the longer I lived there, the more controlling things got. One time, I left my trash bin out a few hours past pickup, and I got a written warning taped to my door. Another time, Karen sent me a notice because my grass was half an inch too tall. I wish I was joking. It was like living under a microscope, and Karen was watching every move I made. That's when I decided it wasn't worth it anymore. I found a new place, listed my house, and made plans to leave. But the second she heard I was moving, things got weird. Karen started emailing me constantly, demanding to see my move-out paperwork. She even came by uninvited, saying I wasn't allowed to leave without board approval. That's when the legal threats started. First a letter from the HOA attorney, then an actual lawsuit claiming I owed thousands in unpaid fees. But something about all of it felt off. Too aggressive, too personal. So I started looking into how the HOA was structured. And what I found changed everything when I started digging into the HOA setup. I didn't expect to find much, maybe some outdated rules or a technicality. But what I uncovered was way more serious. The HOA wasn't properly registered with the county. Their so-called bylaws hadn't been updated in over a decade. And several pages were missing signatures, legal ones, from homeowners who were supposed to approve any changes. Even worse, Karen had been collecting dues, issuing fines, and enforcing rules without any actual authority. On paper, the HOA technically didn't even exist the way she claimed. But before I could confront her, things escalated. I started getting letters from her legal team. But when I checked, the lawyer wasn't even licensed in our state. It felt more like intimidation than anything else. Neighbors began avoiding me. A couple even warned me quietly to back off that. Karen had a history of making people's lives miserable if they challenged her. One guy, Tom, who lived 2 houses down, told me she once fined him every single week for months over a garden gnome on his porch. He said he paid hundreds just to make it stop. Another neighbor, Maria, had to take down her holiday lights early because Karen said they were a distraction to traffic. These weren't just isolated events, it was a pattern of control. I realized I wasn't the only one fed up. A few neighbors started talking to me more openly once they heard I was fighting back. It wasn't just about my move anymore. It was about standing up to someone who had taken advantage of the whole community for years. But the more I pushed, the more Karen pushed back, and it was clear she wasn't going down without a fight. Something bigger was brewing, and I had no idea how far she'd go with everything I'd learned. I knew I had to take this to someone who could actually help. So I met with a real estate attorney who specialized in HOA law. I handed him the paperwork, the fines, the bogus lawsuit, everything. After about 10 minutes of flipping through the documents, he looked up at me and said, "This whole thing is a mess. You might have a case not just to get out of the lawsuit, but to challenge the HOA itself." That was the moment things got real. Word must have gotten out because Karen suddenly went full force. She called an emergency HOA meeting without telling me and tried to vote me in violation of several rules I hadn't even heard of before. A neighbor slipped me a copy of the agenda, and it looked like something from a courtroom drama. Accusations, dollar amounts, threats of liens on my property. All of it typed up like she was preparing for war. I showed up to the next meeting with my lawyer, and the look on Karen's face said everything. She didn't expect me to fight back. She tried to shut us down, saying we weren't allowed to speak. But once my attorney started reading from the county property code and pointing out the missing legal filings, the room got real quiet. That night, few neighbors pulled me aside in the parking lot. They whispered things like, "Finally," and "about time." It felt like people were starting to wake up, but it also felt dangerous. The next day, I found a notice on my door, signed, unmarked, but threatening more legal action if I didn't drop everything. Karen was desperate. And when desperate people lose control, they tend to do things that cross the line. I had no idea what was coming next. Just when I thought things couldn't get any more out of control, I got a call from the county records office. The clerk I'd been in contact with asked me to come in. They had found something strange while searching for the HOA's original filing documents. When I got there, she handed me a thin manila folder. Inside were faded copies of the original HOA paperwork from over 20 years ago. And Karen's name wasn't on any of it. Not only was she not a founding member, but there was also no record of her ever being officially elected as president. No votes, no meeting minutes, nothing. It looked like she had just taken over one day, and no one ever questioned it. People had just gone along with it, assuming she had the authority. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just an abusive HOA president. This was someone who had built her own little empire out of smoke and mirrors. I brought the documents straight to my lawyer, and he couldn't believe it. "If this is legit," he said, "not only is the HOA operating illegally, but every fine, every due, every legal threat, all baseless." But before we could take any legal action, my security camera caught something chilling. Late at night, someone came up to my front door and ripped down the notice I'd taped up about challenging the HOA. Then they left a new one again. No signature, but this time it said, "*walk away while you still can." That wasn't just a threat. That was a warning. The line had been crossed, and now it wasn't just about rules or lawsuits. It was personal. Karen or someone working with her wasn't going to let this go without a fight. And I was more determined than ever to see it through. The next HOA meeting was the turning point. This time, I came prepared not just with my lawyer, but with copies of the county records, proof of the missing elections, and statements from multiple neighbors who'd had enough of Karen's control. The room was packed. People who usually avoided meetings altogether showed up, quietly taking their seats, whispering to each other. You could feel the tension before it even started. Karen walked in like she always did, confident, clipboard in hand, acting like she owned the place. But the moment I stood up and read from the county report, her expression changed. My lawyer handed out copies of the documents, and the room went silent. I laid it all out: the missing legal registration, the lack of elections, and the fact that Karen had never been officially authorized to run the HOA. That's when something unexpected happened. My quiet garden gnome neighbor stood up and said, "I nominate we dissolve this HOA." Another person seconded it. Karen tried to object, saying it wasn't on the agenda, but it was too late. My lawyer explained that, given the HOA's legal standing or lack of it, the homeowners could vote to disband it right then and there. And they did. It was unanimous. Except for Karen. In less than 10 minutes, the very HOA she'd ruled over was gone. But just when I thought it was over, a week later, I got a letter. Not from Karen, but from her lawyer. This time, it wasn't about the HOA. It was personal. Karen had filed a defamation claim against me, saying I'd ruined her reputation in the neighborhood. So yeah, I won the battle. I shut down the illegal HOA. But Karen, she wasn't done yet. And I realized, maybe she never would be. At first, the defamation claim threw me off. After everything, I thought Karen would finally let it go. But looking back, I should have expected it. People like her don't give up control easily. Luckily, my lawyer wasn't too concerned. He said the claim had no real grounds, just another scare tactic. Sure enough, a few weeks later, it was dismissed. No court date, no payout, no case. Just Karen grasping at the last bit of power she thought she had left. With the HOA dissolved, the neighborhood slowly started to feel normal again. People began chatting at the mailbox, decorating their yards without fear of getting fined, and finally feeling like they actually owned their homes. Tom brought back his gnome collection. Maria put up Halloween lights 2 weeks early just because she could. It wasn't just about freedom from rules, it was about freedom from fear. That constant pressure of having someone watch your every move was gone. As for Karen, she stayed quiet after that. Her house went up for sale a few months later. Some say she moved to a new community with an even stricter HOA. Honestly, it wouldn't surprise me. Looking back, all I wanted was to move out in peace. I never expected to take down a fake HOA or stand up to someone who'd bullied an entire neighborhood for years. But I'm glad I did. Because the truth is, a homeowners association is supposed to serve the community, not control it. And no matter how loud or intimidating, is above the law. So if you're dealing with an HOA nightmare, know this: you're not powerless. Sometimes the rules they enforce aren't even real. And sometimes, all it takes is one person willing to ask the right questions.